She thinks of Ethan, of how he cultivated his charm like a brand. There is a knock at the door. She opens to find Liam standing there with his hands mostly empty but for a folded umbrella. Rain drips from the hem of his jacket, and his hair is exactly the sort of wind-sculpted mess that used to be the centerpiece of every neighborhood summer. He has the same slow smile Serena remembers from childhood, the one he used to give when they lost to each other in backyard games and then immediately demanded another round. He looks like a man who has learned to be careful with words. "Couldn't sleep," he says, and for a beat the room reads as if it's been photographed in monochrome. He says, "You didn't answer my texts. Zoe told me." He steps inside without asking, as he has permission to do in a way only a neighbor allowed long ago can. Liam is an old familiarity. He brought cookies to the last block party, he lent her a ladder for a rooftop installation. He was the boy who learned the rules of focus and light alongside her as they both fumbled through art classes at community college. The neighborhood calls him modest. Oh, that quiet kid who studies Go forever. But Serena has always felt his presence like a steady hand at the back of a photograph, a compositional balance. "You're here," she says, and the words come out small. He looks at the illuminated phone on her coffee table, at the stunned way her fingers hover over the images. He sits. There is a short, protective silence. "Is he—" Liam begins. "You saw." She looks at him hard. "He was at a rooftop with someone else. He took pictures." Liam closes his eyes for a second, as though he is counting the beats he needs to say the correct thing. "I'm sorry, No." Serena's voice is steadier than the trembling in her hands. "Don't. I don't need sympathy. I need dignity. I need to not have this become the thing people use to decide whether I am serious." She looks toward the hallway where her coat still hangs, where she had pinned press release copies for the magazine. "Ethan hasn't just been my boyfriend. He has been a presence," Liam supplies quietly, "in the industry." She nods. "And he has been in my head. And tonight, he's decided to celebrate an ex at our anniversary." Before she can sink further, a different thought arrives, sharp and decisive. She remembers the aching smallness when people would say, "When are you getting married?" as if that answer would solve everything. She remembers the chorus of her father's questions, the whispering tens of colleagues who gauge respect by the company you keep. She decides she is tired of being measured by the yards Ethan has stretched her across. For the first time since the photos, she feels a need to act that is entirely for herself. "It's humiliating," she tells Liam. "Not because he cheated, though it's that too. It's humiliating because he gets to make me look thinkable or not by the way he arranges his nights. He gets to be the author of how people see me." Liam listens with a focus so absolute it becomes a kind of shelter. He does not offer cliches. He does not rush to fix. He waits like someone who has practiced restraint. "Then change the author," he says. She laughs, and it's a small, bitter sound. "Change the author how? By writing my own press release?" He stands. "If it's about dignity," he says, "then do something that takes the story out of his hands." The idea is sudden and ridiculous, and, in the way bold things are, beautiful. Like what? Liam moves as if he's making a quiet calculation. He looks at the clock and then at her. "Marry me." The apartment tilts. Not because of the words, which are simple, but because they arrive with the weight of an offer and the electricity of recklessness. Serena feels the air in the room condense into a single point that is all possibility. She pictures the photo someone might take. Two people at a courthouse desk, 1 hour after a betrayal. Two lives rearranged like spilled black and white beads, put fast into a new pattern. "Stop," she says, "because it is absurd. Because marrying is not a coat you can hang on and take off when the weather changes. Because marriage should not be a stunt." "I know how it sounds," Liam says. He is not smiling now. "This is not a joke. It's not a prank.
I don't want to sweep you into anything. But if you want to take back the narrative, if you want a choice that isn't his, he looks like he means it. I can go to the clerk's office. We can say 2 truths and sign until the ink dries. No drama, no press release from my side. Just you choosing to be defended in your way. Serena sees in him the outline of a plan, imperfect and impulsive and hers to accept. The hour on the stove is now 7:38. In 20 minutes, her parents could arrive, and if they walk into a dinner where she is nursing tears and calling lawyers, their pity will be public. But if she walks in as someone who has made a choice, however impulsive, that's an action. It's not healing, not a solution to the root pain, but it is a reclamation of agency in the only way available right now. She pictures Ethan's likely reaction, calculation, anger, then a social media campaign that would make her a cautionary tale. Maybe she will be judged, maybe she will be lauded, but for once the decision belongs to her. I have an hour, she says finally. Give me an hour to think. Liam nods. I'll be on my porch. She finds herself laughing then, a more honest sound, and a neighbor's voice calls out from the hallway. Hey, you two doing a wedding tonight? Claire is on her way, possibly with cupcakes. Zoe texts a string of exclamation points and a single gif of a runaway bride. Serena grabs her bag and keys. She texts her father, not tonight, come over tomorrow, give me some time. She doesn't say why. She opens the door. Outside, the city is soft with the beginning of rain. The clock on the bank across the street reads 7:46. The hour is sheathing itself in wet neon. She walks to Liam's porch on an instinct as old and familiar as the routes they used to take to school. He is there, umbrella closed, waiting like someone who has put several moves on a game board and is now willing to reveal one. They do not speak on the walk to the municipal office. They move as if they are observing old rituals, collecting themselves, placing hands on the handrail where decades of people have steadied themselves, passing under the courthouse's classical stone columns that smell faintly of dust and tin. An elderly clerk with a measured gaze and a ring of keys that rattles like an old camera shutter looks up from his desk when they walk in. The office is small and bureaucratic, and therefore almost sacred. It offers a kind of thin certainty. The clerk asks a few forms, a few names. The world inside the courthouse is quiet. There is no paparazzi, no arrangement of flashbulbs. There is only the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of signatures. They sign. The pen is cool and oddly intimate. No photographer is present, just the scratch of legal ink. They take 2 photographs at the end, formal, wound in the cardboard of state record. By the time the clerk files the certificates at 8:05 p.m., the phone news cycle is beginning to spin, but the first wave hasn't reached Serena. Zoe's voice in the hallway sounds like a bumper crop of relief. You did what? Serena walks out of the courthouse with Liam on her arm, the rain beginning to fall in earnest, making small dark moons on the pavement. She feels 2 things, the odd lightness of an impulsive act that has landed, and a deeper, more cautious tremor, like the tremor of film in developing fluid. She made a choice that is hers. That is true, and the most important fact. Right after the courthouse, they go to Liam's parents' house because it's nearby and warm, and because he says his mother will cook anything to settle a nervous stomach. Mr. and Mrs. Foster greet them with the resting joy of people who expect improbable things to work out. His mother fusses as if this is the most natural thing in the world. His father raises an eyebrow and says, "Well, you always were good at surprising us, Liam." There is a slender, ridiculous normality to their welcome that is the kind of shelter Serena never knew she needed. A soft CTA of life. Zoe squeezes her hand and whispers, "Want to know why she said 'I do' in an hour? Keep watching." She says it as if it were a secret worth passing on. It is, and Serena nods, because there are explanations to come, but none of them will wash away what happens next. Word travels like a rumor. By 9 p.m., someone has posted a grainy image from a courthouse parking lot. Two figures in rain, a small caption. Just married? In the rain? #shocking.
By 9:12, Ethan's name is tagged in a flurry of speculation and the kind of cruel commentary that kills more slowly than a direct blow. Ethan does not respond to the initial social pulse with silence. He responds with a plan. He calls the editor of Vantage, Mr. Peterson, the same magazine that had scheduled Serena's feature next week. His voice is smooth and cruel and very certain of precedent. He reminds Mr. Peterson about the collaboration clause Serena signed last year. He mentions potential reputational harm. He drops an insinuation of private images and career liability. He asks suggestively whether Vantage would want to be associated with what some might call a sudden, unstable decision that would overshadow the editorial. Mr. Peterson hesitates. He is the kind of man whose opinions can be tipped by a well-positioned doubt. For him, momentum matters, and the magazine's analytics team has already so much to worry about. Ethan's call is the kind of pressure that smells like leverage. Meanwhile, the rain washes the courthouse steps, and the photo of Serena and Liam begins to accumulate comments, some sympathetic, some mocking, some cynically curious. Rhonda Sterling, a local influencer who had been fumbling for attention in this season's drama, posts a story with a theatrical gasp emoji and the one-liner, "Drama sells." Her followers swarm. A few friends send messages of stunned support. Zoe calls continuously like a small engine of concern and caffeinated cheer. Claire brings cupcakes that say "new chapter" in icing that looks almost like an apology. Ethan posts a message on his account later that night. It is long and polished. It reads like a public statement drafted by someone who believes in the persuasive power of plausible explanations. He writes that he has made mistakes, that he is always learning, and that he hopes the public can see complexity. He does not apologize directly. Instead, he frames himself as misunderstood and the target of a rush to judgment. The reaction is immediate. A faction says he sounds sincere. Another faction says this is a manipulation. Serena reads the post through the fog of the kitchen at Liam's parents' house and feels the old ache. People will debate him. They will never have to feel the small shards inside her heart. On the walk back to her apartment, Liam's hand finds the small of her back like a compass. They do not need to talk about the legalities. He offers her an umbrella, and in the pattering rain, his presence becomes something like a strategy, quiet, calculated, protective. "Do you regret it?" he asks eventually, as if he's asking about the rain, about whether she wanted to be wet or if she preferred the dryness of caution. She takes time to answer. "Not yet," she says. "We were drowning. I chose a way to stop the water." He nods as if he understands both the metaphor and the consequence. But his expression holds a worry that does not belong in the small, immediate comfort of a porch light and a warm cup of borrowed tea. He tells her they will handle whatever comes, together if she wants. He does not promise to erase the pain. He only promises to not be a bystander. That night, social media churns. Messages that suggest she married for revenge mingle with messages that hail her sudden courage. Columns begin to ask, did she impulsively marry a neighbor to make Ethan jealous? Did she act out of desperation? Analysts on morning shows will later weigh in with careful speculation about what this marriage means for both careers. 1,000 strangers will co-author a narrative that will not fit Serena's inner truth. Ethan, meanwhile, escalates. He starts with emails, formal, razor-precise missives to lawyers about contractual obligations. Then he files a notice with the gallery where Serena had scheduled her solo show. A vague, insinuating letter suggesting that her actions could impact contractual agreements and point to instability. It is the kind of bureaucratic cruelty that takes time to breathe, but then suffocates by committee.
He threatens to reveal details about their past relationship. He hints at private correspondence that could be misinterpreted. Serena feels the first real icy finger of fear then, not for the marriage itself, but for the career she has painstakingly built, for the images she has printed and the shows she has organized. Her work is fragile and public and tends to be evaluated on the fiction of a single moment, an image, a headline, an angle. The thought of a magazine pulling her feature terrifies her not purely because of vanity, but because this is how she makes meaning in the world. To have that taken from her by someone she no longer trusts is an assault on the narrative she has authored of herself. She texts Zoe, "Can you come by tomorrow? We might need to talk to a lawyer." Zoe's reply is immediate. "Already on it. Mr. Lee is free after lunch. He won't let Ethan bully you." That same night, Ethan's harassment takes a more personal shape. He sends messages to Serena's agent suggesting that she has entitlement issues. He messages some of her high-profile contacts with thinly veiled warnings. He hires a small-time PR firm to clarify the situation, which amounts to subtle campaigns that paint her as unstable. He floats a rumor, anonymous at first, that there is a clause in the contract she signed with a former partner, himself, that allows him to pull support if she acts contrary to the brand. These are the small weapons wealth and position wield: insinuation, ink, and men who know how to make a rumor sound like a fact. Serena feels boxed in, because the world seems to prefer the loud claim over the quiet truth. She will need a public vindication, or at least to stop the leak of speculation. Liam takes the first step, not with fists, but with chess-like patience. The next morning, he calls Mr. Peterson at Vantage. His voice is measured. He introduces himself as a neighbor and an investor who admires the arts. He asks a single question. No, not a question, a reassurance. Is Serena still on for next week? Mr. Peterson, who has spent a career balancing advertisers, subscribers, and the impression of being at the center of taste, hedges. "We have concerns," he says. "There are complications." "Name them," Liam replies quietly but with an authority that makes the editor pause. He does not present himself as a savior. He simply plants the idea that someone is watching who cares more than headlines. Later, after he ends the call, Liam steps into the small kitchen of his parents' house and plays with a palm-sized Go set on the table. He moves a black stone into the center with the careful focus that comes when a person is used to thinking several moves ahead. The sound, stone on wood, clicks satisfyingly into place, like a camera's shutter. For those who know Go, this is not just a game. It is a metaphor for life lived through a lattice of strategy: when to protect, when to sacrifice, when to surround. "You're very good at this," Serena says, watching him. Liam shrugs. "It teaches you patience. It teaches you to see strength in silence." He looks up. "I mean the magazine thing, too. I talked to Mr. Peterson. I haven't said anything dramatic. I wanted to check the tone before making any commitments." Serena studies him. He speaks like someone who knows how to arrange the world gently so that pieces cannot fall over at once. Underneath that gentleness, there is a steel, small, hidden, like the frame behind a photograph. "You're not telling me everything," she says, half admonishing, half curious. "That's not fair, Liam. If I'm in this with you, if I chose this, then you can't do the mysterious savior thing." He looks at her, eyes honest. "I won't hide things you need to decide on, but there are things I can't reveal because their revelation would cause more harm than good, for now. I promise to be honest about things that affect you." She lets that be for the moment, because the promise, flimsy as it is the only thing sticking to the wet pavement tonight. It anchors her. Ethan's response to the mounting doubt about him is not subtle. He begins to ramp up the pressure on the legal front. An initial letter from a firm with a name like Harrison & Cole arrives at Serena's agent's office.
It references a clause neither Serena nor her agent remember signing, a clause that supposedly gives Ethan certain rights regarding joint media projects and joint representation. The amount mentioned is obscene, $20 million, and mostly symbolic, a number designed to intimidate a young artist who has nothing like that in her bank account. Serena reads the letter and feels the old, wretched tightness in her stomach. The clause sounds technical. The math is threatening. But the letter has the effect of making the abstract feel like a hand placed on the throat. For a moment, she imagines all her prints pulped to ash and her name turned into a cautionary tale. That evening, she goes to meet with Mr. Lee, a lawyer Zoe recommended, a thin, sharp man with a bookshelf of law journals and a disdain for performative gestures. He listens, interrupts where he should, and draws a simple diagram on a legal pad. Adhesion contracts, he says, are agreements imposed by the stronger party on the weaker, often without meaningful negotiation. They can be unconscionable. If he coerced or misrepresented, we have a path. Serena feels relief like a sudden clean wind. There is process. There is something to do that does not rely on the applause of strangers. And what about the marriage, she asks, purposely direct. Does that change anything legally? People assume that if you're married, some rights transfer. Mr. Lee considers. Marriage is a commitment of personal status, not a magic bullet against corporate coercion. It won't erase contracts, but it will change social dynamics. It means someone else might defend you publicly, and that often complicates, honestly, the oppressor's narrative. They prefer a single, neutral individual to attack. Serena imagines Ethan facing a pair of quiet defenders. The thought makes her stomach flutter. Good, she says. Then we start with proof. Show me how to put the contracts under a microscope. They leave with a plan, documents requested, communications archived, witnesses to be called. Serena feels a gradual regaining of control. She is not naive. She knows power is often a ledger and favors are made of ink. But she knows how to collect evidence. She knows how to print light. The next day, Ethan's cruelty takes an uglier shape. Someone knocks over the lighting equipment at one of Serena's small freelance sets. No one is hurt, but a technician texts a picture to Serena with an angry caption. This was intentional. He sent guys around. The words carry a meaning that does not require proof yet. Someone crossed a line. She reports the sabotage to the gallery and sends a note to Mr. Lee. He responds with cool instructions. Police report, security footage request, witness statements. There will be consequences, if it was orchestrated. When the security footage from the parking lot is pulled, a car can be seen circling and someone taking a photo from across the street. No direct attack, but an attempt to intimidate and gather material. The implications are ugly. The law must be patient. Legality moves like water through a stone tunnel. Strategy, Liam says, moves faster. There is a moment, small and private, where Serena realizes just how much she had been surviving in the old story, the one where she waited for someone else to define her worth. The marriage did not do that for her. It handed her back the ability to name the problem in a way that felt true to her. Someone was trying to control her by manipulating perception. At the end of the week, Ethan appears on a morning talk show. He wears a photogenic sorrow and a readiness to be complicated. The host asks about the photos. He answers with the carefully wound script of someone used to being believed. He suggests a mutual miscommunication and hints at the pressures of being in the public eye. The clip is shared with commentary that leans sympathetic. The internet nods because the internet is hungry for narratives that fit existing frames. Serena watches with chlorine in her throat. She is surprised by her own sensation when she sees him on screen, a primal, white-hot anger that wants to dismantle everything neat about him.
She thinks of the words Liam said about strategy and the way he placed that black ghost stone on the table. She remembers his hand finding her back on the courthouse steps and feels, for the first time since the photos, that she has a person in her corner. And yet she is also wary. The marriage did not erase the immediate hazard. It created new angles for the press to attach to and for Ethan to exploit. She knows the next moves will matter. She knows there will be more than headlines to win. That night, as the city sleeps under a smear of neon rain, Liam takes out a small notebook and pulls it across the kitchen table at his parents' house. On the cover is a sketch of a go board. He writes something with a deliberation that looks almost ceremonial. Serena notices, curious, and reaches for the page. He puts a hand over hers for a second. "Not yet," he says. "I want you to be part of what comes next." She watches him, this man who, in less than 48 hours, moved from neighbor to husband to strategist. There are hints of other things in his manner. A knowledge of how to talk to editors that goes beyond casual charm. A calm wealth of resources he does not flaunt. He still says he is a businessman who likes quiet things and plays the modest card. But there are moments, like when he calls Mr. Peterson and the editor instantly listens, where the veil flickers. "Promise me one thing," Serena says slowly. "No secrets that affect me. If you'll be my husband, be that, with ordinary things and with the big ones. I need to know who I married." He meets her eyes steadily. "I'll tell you everything that matters," he says. She nods, somewhat mollified. There is relief in the bargain. She will not force confessions tonight. She will accept the reality that some things will unfold in strategy. 2 days later, Ethan takes an action that becomes the first clear public demonstration of escalation. He files papers to seek an injunction to block Serena's feature spread and pulls some advertisers from Vantage who prefer to avoid trouble.
The editor calls Serena, hands over the phone to someone in publicity, and composes a careful, non-committal statement about pending evaluation. This is the concrete pain she feared. A feature lost would mean visibility lost. It would mean galleries, curators, and future opportunities would view her as a risk. Liam stands beside her as she hears the editor speak. He does not shout. He does not appear on camera. He calls his parents after, and his mother sighs as if she has been awaiting this kind of storm. He brings Mr. Lee into the fold and asks questions as if planning an opening, a Go player placing stones to limit an opponent. "Have you ever been in a position where a story had to be fought for?" Serena asks him quietly, exhausted. "Not like this," he admits, "but I know about infrastructure. I know people who can shore things up without making a spectacle." Her eyes narrow. Infrastructure? Lawyers, PR teams who will counter-narrative, small acquisitions that can shift the board. He uses the language of someone who can translate resources into movement. He does not yet say the word money, but he implies that he can reconfigure more than conversation. She accepts the hint as she accepts his hand, with cautious gratitude. But even as they begin to shield themselves with strategy, the human cost is real. Claire receives a threatening text that implies she should mind her own business. Zoe wakes to an anonymous voicemail that simply breathes, and a tech in Serena's former studio reports a suspicious vehicle idling near the building. The pattern is not yet proof of a single plan, but it is loud enough that each small event becomes a fracture of certainty. One afternoon, while Serena is at the gallery taking light readings for a new print, a man in a suit hands her an envelope. Inside are photographs, duplicates of the ones Ethan posted, and a handwritten note that says, "Don't pretend you didn't know how this would be taken." The implication is clear. Evidence can be collected, repackaged, and used to hurt. Serena holds the envelope and experiences an old fear, the sense that someone else can always make a story for her. She turns to the balcony and sees Liam standing by the railing, his hands steady at the wooden posts, his profile like a silhouette in a photograph. He raises a hand. When she tells him about the envelope later, he is composed. We'll make it impossible for him to leverage that, he says. And there is a casualness that is both comforting and unnerving. We'll document. We'll involve the police if necessary. We'll make the gallery and Vantage aware. We will not be bullied. It is not a vow of dominance, she knows. It is a tactical promise. It is the language of someone responding not with threats, but with systems. She begins to notice small clues around him that do not fit the quiet neighbor story everyone has been telling. A passkey to the Vantage building he uses too easily when he pops in for a quick look. A call he makes where the person on the other end addresses him as Liam, good to have your input. Or a referral he arranges to a curator that seems almost like the curatorial equivalent of a checkmate. One evening, as they sit with warm mugs in the low light of Liam's kitchen, he tells her a story about Go, a game where a single sacrifice at the right moment can secure a life. People see the last move and call it genius, he says. They rarely see the many moves it took to make that last one possible. She thinks of the marriage, of the last move she made and the suddenness of it. She wonders if she was sacrificed as much as she was rescued, and if the difference matters. Liam slides a small black box across the table. He opens it to reveal a single ivory Go stone engraved with a tiny camera shutter. He says nothing, but his eyes hold hers, asking whether she wants to know the details. Serena puts her hand on the stone. It is cool. There is more to come. The storm is building. The next moves are being set across the board. But for now, in this pause, she feels the small, undeniable fact. She chose. She acted. And the world will respond, either by attempting to crush her or by being rearranged around the force of her choice. Later that night, when the lights in the apartment finally go off and the city hum settles, Serena scrolls through her messages one last time. There are thousands of strangers' reactions. There are some old friends' texts that read like lifelines. There are a few unexplained gaps, social accounts that have gone silent, invitations that have been pulled. And in one unread email, a line waits. We have questions for you about your upcoming spread. She exhales. The hour that felt like a single blink has stretched into a web. Somewhere outside, the quiet, someone is making a different kind of plan. Ethan is not a man content to let a narrative go. He is a man who accumulates edges and files them like tools. If his initial weapon is rumor, his second will be legal pressure. If his second fails, what remains are more personal attacks. Serena lies awake and listens to the rain on the window. She thinks about images she has taken, the way a person looks at the exact moment they choose not to lie, the honesty caught in the eye before they fold themselves into social good behavior. The rain that night had tamped down into a thin, steady patter, the city breathing in a gray, patient rhythm. Serena wakes before dawn, with the images of the envelope in her hand and the cool weight of Liam's box on the kitchen table. For the first hour after she gets up, the world is all light measurement, how the early sun slices through the blinds, how the edge of a print becomes a story when placed exactly at the right angle. She leans into the work because order helps. She peels the backing from a test print and watches the emulsion settle like a small, private miracle. By mid-morning, the small practicalities of defense begin to crowd the room. Mr. Lee arrives with folders that smell faintly of coffee and authority. He lays out a map of cold facts, dates, timestamps, emails, payment records. If we can show orchestration, he says, without theatricality, then the intimidation becomes actionable. If we can connect vendors, payments, directives, he stops because Serena already understands the sentence. The police report goes in with the careful thoroughness of someone who knows that small details eventually become big ones. The technician who texts her about the sabotaged lights meets with an officer and signs a statement. Security footage from the parking lot shows a car idling for an unusual period and a person moving with a purposeful, observing gait. It is not a smoking gun for a crime, but it is a clue, and clues will be assembled into a case. Liam is everywhere and nowhere. He arrives at meetings with the same quiet competence he has used since childhood. Steady gaze, few words, a kind of practical warmth. He is not performative about resources, but he is unshakably pragmatic. He asks the technical questions that make engineers lean forward. Who has access to the server? Who ordered the guard change? He is the kind of partner who makes a list, checks it twice, and then starts recruiting people who do not speak in showy promises, but in deliverables. Document everything, he tells her, and his voice is not paternal, it is administrative, almost filial. Every call, every text. If there are emails, archive them. If someone wants to speak on record, let us know. We don't call the press, we let the facts speak. There is comfort in the method. Serena likes lists. She likes exposure, literally letting light destroy the silver halides until an image becomes visible. She becomes, in this small, terrible season, a person who photographs evidence, screenshots, receipts, timestamps. It is work that restores agency, because she chooses the exposures. Ethan grows louder. He hires a boutique PR firm, one with glossy slides and reassuring guarantees. He hires a security shop, people who do not ask too many questions when a man wants to make a presence felt. He hires a lawyer who writes letters with venom wrapped in civility. But those transactions leave traces, invoices, wire transfers, text messages. Mr. Lee deposits subpoenas. A clerk somewhere runs paper with a rubber stamp that sounds like a gavel. The interaction between money and law is never clean, but the trail exists. On a humid Thursday afternoon, Liam asks Serena to come with him to a match. It's nothing, he says when she pushes for a reason, just something I want you to see. They go to an auditorium filled with the focused silence of people who understand the long conversation of play. The National Go Championship holds a stillness. Chairs aligned like ribs, the scratching of pens and cards, the ancient, ritualized movement of stones onto boards. Serena stands at the edge of the room and watches people older and younger than her move with a patience that tastes like history. Liam sits in with a small pile of shoes neatly placed by his stool, simple, unpretentious, and when his name is called, the room recognizes it like an old bell. The scoreboard lights up. The announcer, a quiet voice, praises a competitor known for a deceptive style, patient, difficult to read. Serena realizes over the first several moves that the man she married in a courthouse hour is not merely someone who played Go for neighborly entertainment. His opening is economical, placing stones that read like sentences. His concentration has the calm of someone used to shouldering responsibility in silence. By the time the match tightens, Liam is performing with the kind of relentless clarity that makes the board look small and inevitable. A final series of moves ends with a soft, clean victory. The room releases a breath it had been holding. After, reporters swarm politely. Camera flashes punctuate the dusk like shutter clicks. Someone asks for a photo. Liam accepts with no flourish, a trophy balanced in his hands like a secret. When Serena sees him on stage, polished, precise, the applause like a tide, she feels a strange, complicated pride. He is not just a neighbor who can protect. He is someone who has learned to win by being patient rather than loud. The match is a reveal, but it is not the final one. On the way home, his phone vibrates with a call that is clearly about money and not about strategy. He steps away for a moment, returns with nothing, and yet everything altered in the way he carries himself. Serena watches the slight quickening of his jaw and thinks of the passkey, the hotel concierge who answered to his name, the way people on the phone had used the phrase, "your input," as if it were a currency. "Who are you, really?" she asks, not confronted, but curious in a way that has the heat of an unresolved photograph. He tells her the outline. He runs a small holding company, old money, cautious investments in arts and tech. He funds municipal programs for artists. He supports a few galleries anonymously. The name he uses publicly is not flashy. He has built a life that sits off camera by design. He says it as if the revelation is small and necessary to tell.
Serena listens and learns that the man who stood in the courthouse with a folded umbrella is also someone with networks and leverage. He is not showy, but he is capable. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asks, and there is neither accusation nor smallness. It is a real question. He thinks, "Because I worried people would stop looking at your work and only at where it came from," he says quietly. "I didn't want you to be someone's charity case."
That answer is soft for a moment, and then hardens into something entirely human. She understands his motive, she recognizes the tenderness, and she also thinks of the right to choose. She will not be a beneficiary of quiet charity. She will be the architect of her own comeback. Their strategies begin to multiply. Mr. Lee files a motion requesting the host of the boutique PR firm hand over client records. The firm fights, but the weight of subpoena and the principle of proportionality moves lawyers to compliance. Emails surface that show clear instructions to manufacture narrative angles demonizing Serena if she did not step back. Invoices tie a payment to an individual account that Mr. Lee traces to a shell company linked to Ethan. The pattern becomes a net. Ethan scrambles. He cannot understand why his usual strategies do not dissolve the opposition. In the past, rumor and carefully placed doubts were enough to smear reputations and then move on. He is used to being effective because he has always had structure around him: money, optics, people who will do uncomfortable things without asking why. But now the world he built, centered on plausible deniability and efficient coercion, begins to show seams where cash flows and emails expose intent. On a Wednesday morning, a new bullet arrives. A journalist from an online outlet calls Serena and asks if she wants to run an interview detailing the process of resisting a smear campaign. She tests the idea and then agrees, because the truth being told in her voice feels like reclamation rather than exhibition. The piece is careful, not vengeful. It is about the rigging of perception and the slow work of undoing it. It resonates. Simultaneously, a small victory arrives in the legal arena. Mr. Lee presents the court with a chain of messages that make the attorney in Ethan's camp frown. Payments to vendors with memos that sound like directives. Messages instructing personnel to make the artist look unstable and seed that version. A judge, being a person who reads facts as if they were architecture, grants a discovery order. There is no gavel-waving triumph, just the slow creak of a machine grinding toward accountability. As the legal wheels turn, Liam executes his part. He quietly begins purchasing shares, not in a conspicuous headline-grabbing way, but by acquiring a controlling interest in the small parent company that owns Vantage. It is a precise maneuver, a targeted investment that secures the magazine's independence and prevents outside pressures from suffocating Serena's spread. He does it through a consortium and careful due diligence. Mr. Peterson, the editor, signs papers months later with a mixture of relief and resignation. The sale is framed as a rescue. The acquisition is not a magic fix. Contracts have fine print, and the dossier Ethan produced still carries threats. But the purchase changes the game board in a practical sense. The voices that once could make a magazine flinch now have to negotiate with a board that values editorial integrity, Liam quietly among them. He does not trumpet the maneuver. He sits on meetings and asks practical questions about editorial independence, budgets, and the importance of giving a feature a fair run. His presence is catalytic. There are darker sounds in the background. Ethan grows reckless. At first, his actions are bureaucratic: withdraw advertisers, draft letters, seed gossip. Then they tilt toward menace. A car sideswipes a technician's truck and flees. An anonymous caller threatens small friends who supported Serena online. The gallery curator mentions receiving a courtesy warning, suggesting that associating with Serena could be complicated. It is intimidation dressed in plausible deniability. When a late-night broadside targets Zoe, someone who had only ever been loyal and honest, Liam pounces.
He uses his networks to arrange protection from members of Serena's circle. He does not post photos of the security details on his phone. He does not stage viral declarations. He simply pays for surveillance, arranges for police liaison, and installs safety protocols at the gallery, cameras, sign-in sheets, and honest light at the main door. It is the work of a man used to foreseeing ripple effects. Amid the legal maneuvers, the human moments matter. Claire brings dinner and stays too long. She is a small, comforting chaos with messy hair and a laugh that cuts through stress. Mr. Morgan, Serena's father, sits with a sort of stubborn pride. He is the kind of man who walks into a neighborhood bar and buys everyone around when he thinks courage needs company. He says little, but leaves visible marks. A hand on Serena's shoulder, a quiet text at odd hours. Rhonda, who had initially sniffed at the courthouse photos and posted with a clickbait gleam, watches the story slant into something complicated. She has a moment, private and at a cafe where she is editing a piece, when she reads a small thread of emails exposed in Discovery that make her stomach drop. Ethan had contacted influencers instructing how to seed doubt. She realizes that her post was not journalism. It was an asset she had traded for temporary clicks. The realization is not instant redemption, but it opens a space for humility. She reaches out to Serena, not with grand apologies, but with an offer. "Let me help with communications. I was wrong." The first message is awkward and thin, but Zoe, fiercely loyal, arranges a meeting between them. Rhonda shows up and says 3 sentences that feel like a repair. "I saw what happened. I amplified it. I'm sorry. If you want, I want to help make this right." It is not theatrical. It is not the headline she seeks. It is messy and human, and, in the narrative of the last week, it is rare. The public begins to notice something else. Ethan's timeline starts to wobble.
Investors who had once nodded politely in his board meetings now frown at the optics. A shareholder meeting in one of his smaller ventures features questions from people who are no longer satisfied with plausible deniability. Where there had been a carefully buffered image, small fissures appear when board members ask for risk assessments tied to personal conduct. The downward mathematics are not dramatic overnight. It is not a cartoon bankruptcy. It is attrition. A sponsor pulls advertising. An investor declines to roll a tranche of funding. The small, discreet companies that once sponsored Ethan's lifestyle now measure risk as if it were a chemical they must not inhale. At the same time, evidence continues to accumulate. A vendor returns a check with a note that reads, "I was asked to do this," and forwards messages showing the ask. The boutique PR firm, faced with subpoena and witnesses prepared to testify, flips. They hand over internal notes that reveal plans to run a destabilization campaign. The campaign is not particularly creative. Its novelty was its cruelty. Mr. Lee files the motions. The court is interested. Journalists look at the paper trail and begin to write not just about Serena's personal trajectory, but about systematic tactics men like Ethan have used when they don't get what they want. The public narrative becomes more complicated and more sympathetic. The piece Serena agreed to run is published, and it is not a victory lap. It is a careful account of the erosion of agency that smear campaigns inflict. It refrains from spectacle. It speaks of small, measurable things: a lost client, a saboteur, a friend who received a threat. People respond with messages of support and with the occasional ugly note, because the internet will always be both cathedral and sewer. Meanwhile, a new move advances. Serena receives an invitation to present prints at a private exhibition curated by Master Ao, the anonymous patron who had been buying works in the background and sending polite, encouraging letters. The invitation is worded with the discretion of someone who knows the value of surprise. Serena is puzzled. Master Ao had been a phantom patron, a name on receipts, and a whisper of admiration. Liam watches her face as she opens the envelope. There is a small, inscrutable smile on him, like someone watching a card turn. He begins, and then stops. "You deserve to know," he says later that night in the kitchen with the steam of tea fogging the light. His hands move with that calm decisiveness that had become the backbone of their strategy. She watches him wait for a moment that is both tiny and enormous. "Was he?" she asks, meaning the patron. He meets her gaze. "I am Master Ao," he says simply, as if revealing a piece of his past that had been a matter of habit. The words are neither dramatic nor manufactured. They are an explanation. He explains that O is a name he uses in certain galleries, a persona that allowed him to promote artists without creating the whisper of a father figure hovering over their work. "I didn't want to be known to your audience," he says. "I wanted you to be recognized on your own merits. I wanted someone to buy your prints who believed in the images themselves without the added weight of my resources." The confession has the effect of an exposure, light spilling on a hidden negative. Serena has to process a dozen things at once: the tactical advantage, the tenderness, the potential for misinterpretation. She remembers the small engraved stone with the camera shutter that had been an intimate artifact. Now it sits between them on the counter, like a language only they have spoken. "Why now?" she asks. "Because you asked to be part of what comes next," he says. "Because silence felt like interference. Because I realized that protecting you from visibility had become a way to keep you small." Her throat tightens. This admission is not a rescue so much as a correction. It tells her that he has been near her, not to control, but to make sure there was a soft ground beneath her. It is not perfect. Protection can bleed into paternalism if not tethered to respect. She tells him that, and his answer is a small, honest humility. "I didn't want to steal your light," he says, "but I was afraid of how loud the world can be when it wants to drown someone out." They decide together to frame the Master O reveal as part of the exhibition's narrative, but only if Serena wants it that way. She chooses to keep a measure of the mystery, reveal enough to show that there has been patronage, but not to make the patron the story. She will not be rescued by a rich man. She will be an artist who had allies. Then the public confrontation happens. It is not a courtroom drama so much as a staged unmasking of documents. Mr. Rhee skillfully negotiates a settlement that includes an admission of wrongdoing from the PR firm, the release of internal memos that outline the smear strategy, and a binding agreement that applicable advertisers will not cooperate with similar campaigns. In parallel, the vendor who had received threats files a suit alleging harassment and intimidation. The combination of legal pressure and the tarnish of revealed documents makes corporate counsel in Ethan's world nervous. Faced with the risk of deeper exposure, a tranche of Ethan's funders withdraw support. A skeptical article in a respected business paper details the cash flows and reputational risks. A boardroom table starts to look like a shifting mosaic, and Ethan, who had always moved through cities with the security of prearranged exits, suddenly finds doors harder to open. There is no grand arrest, no televised fall. Instead, Ethan meets his consequences in a cold, practical ledger: investor withdrawals, a tarnished reputation, a lawsuit that pings in the margins of his life like a persistent leak. He is forced to settle with one side and to accept a legal judgment that stipulates retraction of defamatory claims and punitive damages. It is not total ruin, but it is enough accountability to unbalance him. On a crisp autumn evening, Serena stands in the gallery as people move among her prints. The room smells of paper and polished wood. The lighting is soft and precise, the kind of light she has spent a career learning to chase. Critics murmur. Collectors circle like slow birds. The photographs hang like truths, careful compositions that show people in moments of taken breath, subjects balanced between light and shadow. There is a hush when people stand in front of a print and read it in the silence. It is also the night Liam reveals himself publicly as Master Ao. He has arranged something small and elegant, a short speech not about himself but about the practice of patronage. He speaks of art needing support and of the importance of letting artists stand in their own light. Then he steps aside and allows the curator to announce the reveal. It is not performative.
It is an admission offered as a choice Serena had made. He says nothing about rescue, he talks about belief. The room tolerates the reveal like a quiet surprise. Some gaze a little more closely at Serena, but she stands firm, releasing to the world the image she has always wanted it to see. A capable artist with the power to ask for help and the right to choose what help looks like. At the back of the room, a small television plays a clip from an earlier interview, a line of Ethan's that had been lifted from context and used to smear her. The piece is framed now with the discovery materials, messages, contracts, the PR memos. The curator has arranged a small timeline installation that shows how perception was manufactured and then challenged. It is didactic, but not didactic enough to feel like training. It is educational in a way that asks people to think. Serena moves through the crowd with Liam at her side, receiving hugs that are warm and not exploitative. Rhonda approaches first, eyes apologetic. "I owe you," she says simply. "You didn't know," Serena replies, "and you do now." "Want to collaborate on the next piece?" Rhonda asks, half smiling. The rivalry softens into possibility. Serena nods. There is a small flicker of something new, an unlikely ally. The night ends not in public triumph, but in a sequence of private moments. She sits with an old friend who tells a story about a frame that went crooked in an earlier show, and how Serena recentered the whole series simply by moving one print. Liam watches her with that near-surgical attention he reserves for moments that need care. At one point, he draws from his pocket a small stack of letters tied with a ribbon. 5 years ago, he says,
I wrote some things. I never sent them, because I thought, he shrugs, I was cowardly about how to be present. She unties the ribbon and reads. The letters are not sonnets. They are small observations written over years about photos he'd admired in gallery windows, postcards from competitions, notes about chance encounters. They speak of a man who had watched from a respectful distance, and then, in recent months, had stepped in when silence would have meant collusion. She reads one that says, in a sentence neither flamboyant nor minimal, that he admired how she could find dignity in the smallest composition. Another is from the year before the photos surfaced, brief, practical, an offer to loan a light for an installation. The letters are not proof of destiny. They are proof of attention. Her throat fills, and she places a hand over the paper as if to anchor herself. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asks at last, a different light in her voice. "Because I wanted you to feel your own shape in the world," he says again, the humility in his answer now balanced with ownership. "And because I feared that publicness, my publicness, would drown you out." They speak for a long time in a small corner of the gallery as the crowd thins, trading stories about images, about the way a negative hides a secret until exposure. The narrative winds tighten one last time. Ethan's legal entanglements press him into a corner. His funders demand accounting. The PR memos make their way into public filings, and the resulting coverage makes his business life harder. He is forced into settlements he had thought unnecessary. Small lawsuits pop like sores on his balance sheet. The man who once moved with the surety of a polished studio mic begins to speak in a lower register, one that lacks the brazen confidence he used to rely on. His calls to the magazine mean less now, and are mostly returned with guidelines counsel prepared by lawyers. There is a final piece of exposure that accomplishes 3 things at once. It provides legal leverage, it satisfies the public appetite for accountability, and it gives Serena a platform for a choice she has been circling for weeks. Mr. Peterson, who had been wrestling with the ethics of his platform, organizes a panel at the gallery titled Art, Agency, and Accountability. The panel is not a show trial. It is a conversation that includes legal scholars, artists, and survivors. Mr. Lee is on it. Rhonda moderates. The room is full of people who are tired of simplistic narratives about revenge and rescue and are seeking to understand systemic answers. Serena speaks. She does not make a sweeping speech about moral victory. She talks about small things.
collecting receipts, the terror of a threatening voicemail, the warmth of people who sat in the front row and believed her. She looks at the camera and at the people in the room and says plainly, "I married someone in an hour because I made a choice to reclaim a narrative that was being written for me. That choice doesn't solve everything. It opened a door that let me make other choices." The panel is sober and humane. It does not coax applause. It suggests that agency is messy and slow. On the legal front, the final overturning of Ethan's leverage comes when the judge rules certain clauses in the collaboration agreement unenforceable. The court finds that certain language was unconscionable and points to evidence of coercive behavior. Ethan's claim to the $20 million clause is recognized as a legally invalid intimidation tactic. The ruling makes headlines not as a melodramatic victory, but as a legal precedent that clarifies how coercion can masquerade as contract. The settlement that follows obligates Ethan to retract defamatory statements, to fund a small restorative grant to a community arts organization, and to submit to an injunction prohibiting further harassment of Serena and associated parties. It also includes a clumsy, legalistic apology that reads like a recalibrated press release. The man who once commanded rooms now has the weight of legal documents to carry. There is no melodramatic collapse, just consequences that aggregate into defeat. After the dust settles, the magazine runs Serena's feature spread with a stunning gatefold and a short preface that acknowledges the context without making the story about scandal. In the piece, she writes about the practice of waiting for light and the work of making an image when circumstances try to distort it. The editorial team uses the acquisition Liam orchestrated to assert that the arts must have sanctuaries in which truth can be published without fear. The exhibition becomes a turning point in her career rather than an endpoint. Sales are modest but meaningful. Critics write about the way her pictures demand time rather than instant consumption. Offers come in for residencies and small grants. She says yes selectively, prioritizing projects that align with her voice rather than those that offer a quick trajectory. The reveal of Master Ao becomes a story about patronage that reminded people of how the arts survive, not through dramatic rescues, but through quiet, consistent support. It is not about a single man saving a woman. It becomes an example of how people with resources can slow down and do what they can without dominating. Liam's own arc is quiet in its conclusion. He does not become a swaggering tycoon who buys headlines. He continues to run his company with a calm, strategic hand, funding arts programs, negotiating acquisitions discreetly. Sometimes he travels for work and returns with small stories about policy rooms and boardrooms, and sometimes he shows up late at the studio to hang a print. He is not perfect. He is erred in secrecy. But he learns and adjusts, and his public revelation as Master Ao is a pledge to be more transparent about his presence in Serena's life. Their marriage is not rewritten as a theatrical stunt in the press. Instead, it becomes a story about choice and the messy ethics of protection. Serena insists upon refraining it publicly. The courthouse hour was not a retreat, but a decision, one of many she has made and will continue to make. She insists that people understand that a quick "I do" can be a deliberate act of agency when it is chosen by a person who is acting from her own center. In private, Claire, organizes a small wedding reception months later with a cake that reads "Chapters" in shaky icing. Mr. and Mrs. Foster provide music. Mr. Morgan gives a short, stiff toast that makes everyone laugh. Zoe tears up in a way that is equal parts relief and glee. Rhonda shows up, charm regained, offering a toast that praises Serena's courage and Liam's restraint. It is not a fairy tale ending because such things do not exist in real life. It is, instead, the sort of ending that other people might call a beginning. There is a small scandal left over. Ethan tries a last lunge at damage control by attempting to get an injunction preventing the publication of certain private messages. The court declines. The judge writes carefully, in a tone that understands power imbalance, that privacy cannot be used as a shield for intimidation. The legal system, here, acts imperfectly but appropriately. In the last movement, Serena prepares a new series. This is a body of work not about scandal or about rescue, but about the small, dignified acts people make when faced with the erosion of control. The woman who adjusts a child collar. The man who waits in line and pays cash for a stranger's coffee. The grandmother who keeps a photograph of a first prom in a kitchen drawer. The images are quiet and fierce. She exhibits them in a small museum that writes copy speaking to resilience as practice rather than spectacle. On opening night, as guests circulate among the prints, Liam stands beside her and reaches for the engraved ghost stone she carries on a string. He tucks it into her palm and says, simply, "You chose this." She looks at him, the letters in her bag a small weight against her leg. "We chose this," she corrects, and they laugh. Not with the easy triumph of melodrama, but with the gentle knowledge of people who have been through something and come out with more honesty. The final scene is restful rather than cinematic. Serena sits at her kitchen table with the morning light slanted like a soft apology through the blinds. She examines a test strip and smiles at the way a shadow becomes a story. Liam makes coffee and is in the doorway with a cup held like an offering. He does not attempt grand gestures. He stands steady. "You ever regret that hour?" he asks, practical curiosity lacing his words. She considers not the hour, already mythic, but the consequence. She thinks of Mr. Lee's folders, the nights of police work, the letters, the gallery floors, and the way her father smiled at a table that one wet night. "No," she says finally, "I don't regret that I made a choice. I regret that it had to be framed by humiliation. But," she shrugs, "a small movement that holds the weight of learning. It was mine." He raises his cup to the small sunlit rectangle where the print hangs and toasts her. "To choices. To making them our own," she answers. Outside, the city hums on. In private messages, people write to Serena with small details, stories of their own reclaimed moments, letters about choices they are waiting to make. The exhibition continues to be curated thoughtfully. Offers come and are measured. Liam remains a patient strategist at the margins, not a savior on a pedestal. Rhonda contributes a short column about the ethics of coverage. Zoe starts a small fund for artists who need legal counsel. Mr. Lee teaches a seminar on contractual fairness. Ethan fades not as a cartoon villain, but as a man whose patterns caught up with him, losing leverage, paying fines, and learning that bad actions rent a life in ways practical and material. His fall is not poetic. It is accountancy and legal precedent and the quiet consequence of institutions holding him to a standard he had hoped to escape. He does not collapse with dramatic sound. He unravels with the small, humbling business of attrition. At the final celebration, a modest ceremony with friends and family, Serena reads one of the letters Liam wrote years ago aloud in a voice steady enough for the room to hear. The lines are not grand confessions, but notes about light, about watching someone hold their breath with care, about being quietly present. She reads them as a testimony to attention. When she finishes, the room applauds, not a roar, but the kind of clap that comes from people who have followed a process and witnessed honest work. Mr. Morgan stands and says, "She always found the right light," and the audience laughs. The last camera click is a soft punctuation. The 1-hour courthouse image, once a flashpoint of rumor, is now a small part of a longer story. The shocking twist, that the man she married in 1 hour was more than a neighbor, that he was a strategist, a champion, and an anonymous patron, lands not as an explosive reveal, but as a recognition of the ways people arrange their lives to honor each other. Serena's agency remains intact. She decides which exhibitions to accept, she negotiates contracts with Mr. Lee's counsel at her side, and she partners with Liam as an equal. Their marriage, started in an hour of fierce decision, becomes a partnership that values conversation, consent, and mutual support. The clock motif returns now and then, little reminders of the urgency that once propelled her choice, and each time it does, it marks not a reckless move, but a moment that started a deliberate life. If anyone asks later why she said, "I do" in an hour, she offers this. Sometimes a quick choice is the clearest assertion of ownership you can make over a narrative that is trying to be written by others. You can be impulsive and still be yourself. You can act fast and then spend the rest of your life ensuring that the act was true to you and not to someone else's script.
The credits of their life are not the kind that fit neatly into a headline. There are messy days, phone calls, budgeting meetings, an occasional hostile comment online. But those are measured against the work she makes and the way she chooses to live it. There is power, used carefully. There is love, built slowly and with permission. And in the quiet of their shared kitchen, with a go-board folded like a travelogue and a camera shutter engraved on a stone that sits between them, Serena and Liam begin the long, ordinary work of being partners. Arguing over the best angle for a print, making coffee on a Sunday, showing up for each other in ways that are practical, respectful, and chosen. If this story teaches anything, it is that a single hour can change a path but does not determine a life. Choices are entrances to the work that follows. The legal fights, the exhibitions, the slow rebuilding of trust and reputation. The shocking twist was never merely about status or surprise. It was about discovering that the person who stepped into that hour with her had also been building a scaffold, quietly, invisibly. But that scaffold became visible only when she asked for help. Like any photograph, the final image is crafted in the darkroom of time. Light, patience, attention, these are the tools. Serena develops her prints, hangs them, and in the echoes of a career rebuilt and a marriage chosen with clear eyes, she finds a life both deliberate and tender. If this story moved you, share it with someone who likes dramatic twists. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where people reclaim their narratives.